I'm Eric Bean. We are in Seattle, Washington. This is my first trip to Seattle. I'm excited about it. I'm finishing up med school this semester at UW Madison, and I'm interviewing at another UW, University of Washington in Seattle, for residency in anesthesiology. It was a tough day for me. I had raced Ironman Wisconsin 4 weeks beforehand, and it's not my philosophy that you can race an Ironman 4 weeks before another Ironman and have it go particularly well. But, and I had intended to do Ironman Wisconsin as a training day. So I was going to swim it, bike it, run 10K, and drop out. And I got to the 10K point and I was in 4th place. I was feeling good. I was like, oh, I'll do a half marathon. I got to that point. I was in 3rd place, 55 seconds behind 2nd. And I thought that I might have a chance, since I'd closed down 4 minutes on the runner in 2nd place, that I'd probably pass him, move into 2nd, and potentially a first crack that I'd win. I'm a student at UW Madison, so hometown crowd, aunt and uncle are there cheering me on. I just could not give up that opportunity. So I finished it knowing full well that I could have sacrificed Kona. Remarkably felt like I recovered very quickly from that and had some of my best swim and best run workouts leading into Kona. But by the time I got to the bike portion of Kona, I just wasn't feeling strong and cramped up in the middle of the race, which is very odd for me. I usually feel great and finish the bike feeling great and move on to a pretty strong run, but it didn't work out for me. It wasn't my day, but that's how it goes. This year's Kona was a fast course. The winds weren't terrible. I've been, I think, 442 or 443 in that course a few years ago. I've improved in the past few years. My threshold power's up. I think if I had had the day I was capable of, it certainly would have been the 430s, if not maybe the high 420s. That'd be pushing it, but it was a decent day, but I was cramping at mile 55 on the bike, which again doesn't happen to me. And if I hadn't raced an Ironman 4 weeks beforehand, I don't think it would have, and I would have had a strong day. I'm not disappointed with it, but I left a lot out in my previous race. The recipe is you do an early season Ironman and you race Hawaii, or you do a lot of half Ironmans and you race Hawaii. But from my research in sports physiology, my medical understanding, racing an Ironman is a really bad way to train for an Ironman. Just like racing a marathon is a bad way to train for a marathon. Athletes always ask me, hey, I'm doing an Ironman, should I do a marathon to prepare for it? Absolutely not. You'll actually be worse by running a marathon. You'll be worse off for your Ironman. It takes too much out of you, and the intensity you do it is too low to boost the real determinants of fitness the way they need to be boosted. You want to be somewhat polite to your competitors and not be the annoying person on someone's feet who's tapping their feet constantly. You also want to screw up the front quadrant of your stroke by hitting feet. So I like to draft off the hip. I'm completely free in front of me to not bump into someone. It's actually easier to sight because rather than lifting my head, if you lift your head, your hips are going to sink and that's going to cause more draft. So rather than lifting the head to sight and see that person's feet and body ahead of you, you can just turn to the side with every stroke and you just breathe in the direction of the person you're drafting off of. And what you do is you surf their bow wave. So you put your head right at their hips, you surf the bow wave that comes off their shoulders and their hip, and you're sitting pretty, and you have to find that sweet spot. Technically it's a little bit more challenging because you're literally surfing that wave rather than just sitting in a draft zone, but that's what I prefer to do, and you want to get out fast. The bike in Hawaii can be notoriously hard. I mean, if the winds are bad, you're just in for a long day, so you have to accept whatever the gods of that island throw at you and deal with it with a smile. I think the best piece of advice I could give to anyone is you ride your own race. The race on the bike doesn't start until you hit the turnaround at Hawaii. Everything up to that point is setting up a good finish. Certainly, you want to ease up at the very end of the bike. Final 2 miles. Spin at the same cadence you're going to run at. I like to shift down about 1 gear. I'm not really giving up any speed. Maybe your bike split's going to be 30 seconds slower. But, I mean, as you CompuTrainer folks know, that the power required to overcome aerodynamic drag goes as the cube of the velocity. So if you back down just a small amount in speed, you save a tremendous amount of power and energy output. So spin in at the very end and then ease into the run. I'm a big fan of easing into the run. People like to go out really fast, and you tend to see those people at the mile 16 to 20 mark again. But going this way. Of course, I had a rough run this year, but when I'm on form and pace it well, I just settle into a rhythm where it feels natural for my body and tend to hold that pace the whole way and feel really strong in the final 10K. And that's where you can make up a lot of ground. My philosophy is I can teach anyone how to ride a bike really, really fast. It's the only sport in triathlon where you have the advantage of a piece of machinery to help you get from point A to point B. So whether, like in running, it's just stride rate times stride length equals your speed. You have to have a certain body type to run fast. In cycling, if you're a very strong person, you prefer low cadence, you can select a gear for that. If you're weaker muscularly but have a great aerobic capacity and can spin a high cadence, you can still throw out a lot of power, and you can select a gear for that. So anyone can bike well. The key is you want to improve your lactate threshold power output, lactate threshold velocity. That is the number one most important thing you're doing. So you want to train like you're a 40-kilometer time trialist, regardless if you're training for a relatively short distance race or you're training for an Ironman. People emphasize volume way too much. They underestimate the importance of intensity. It can all be done in the CompuTrainer. And just like a few interesting bits of data, in 2009, I had my PR Ironman. I raced 8:29. The first 6 months of that year, I trained less than 6 hours a week, almost 100% CompuTrainer time, almost 100% cycling time. So basically, no swimming, no running for 6 months of the year. So then starting June, I did 15 hours a week, again, almost all cycling, like 95% cycling. All the quality stuff was done in the CompuTrainer. Did a 40K time trial, over 400 watts, which is pretty good for a triathlete. That's the definition. I use a very similar definition for lactate threshold. You can define lactate threshold in many different ways. I define it as the inflection point in the blood lactate accumulation curve. So if this is a XY axis, on the Y axis you have lactate accumulation, on the X axis you have power output. If you were to take blood samples and measure someone's lactate accumulation as a function of intensity, those are early linear phase of lactate accumulation where most people baseline are about 1 millimolar, and then as intensity increases, that accumulation goes up to maybe 2 point something millimolar, but it's relatively linear. You hit this inflection point in the curve where the accumulation goes up in a nonlinear manner. So I like to measure with blood lactate samples and determine OBLA, the onset of blood lactate accumulation. That's lactate threshold. And when I design lactate threshold training for athletes, we train just above lactate threshold. So there's a significant accumulation of lactate in the blood. Well, there are also theories about training just below lactate threshold. I think that's bunk. It's not as effective. You'll get benefit, of course, because you're close to LT. You get some aerobic benefits, but the bang for your buck is here. I'm going to do a test on a CompuTrainer with a lactate analyzer. I'm going to determine your lactate threshold power, your lactate threshold heart rate, and I'm going to use that point as the anchor point to design all your training zones around. Workout in an hour that takes you 2.5 hours on the road, and you see exactly what your numbers are. Next week you do a very similar workout, you see your progress. You're like, oh, I improved 10 watts this week. I like that. Let's do it again. Do you improve another 10 watts, another 10 watts? That's a big difference over a year, 2 years, 3 years. Fast Forward Triathlon is my coaching company, and I work with Inside Out Sports. We have a professional development triathlon team, so we've identified a small group of some of the most talented amateur and neo-pro athletes in the country, and we're giving them the resources. One of them is the CompuTrainer, also coaching, hooking them up with sponsors. Cervelo's joined us as a sponsor this year. And watch for people in blue and orange uniforms that say Fast Forward Triathlon and Inside Out Sports in both ITU and 70.3 and Ironman racing this year.
Thanks for spending some time with us today. We really
Absolutely.
appreciate it, and best of luck across the board in all your endeavors.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.